Hey, Steve, thank you so much for taking out the time today, chatting with us. And I just want to say thank you again. We had some technical difficulties the first go around, and you're such a great guest that you were able to come back on, etch some time out for us. So, getting back into it, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you have really grown yourself in real estate up to today?
Sure. um, and Peter, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having me on here. I want to thank you for your generosity and your patience. And it's take two.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yes, so Steve Jones and I have been in real estate for a long time. I started, I really got interested in real estate about 17 years ago. I um, I had been sort of dabbling in it prior to that. I'd been a landlord for a long time, homeowner, property owner, and again, sort of dabbling in being a landlord. I It was really the blind leading the blind. I'll tell you, just you jump into stuff, and I you figure it out as you go along. And so I'd been going down that road, and then this opportunity presented itself. I partnered with this guy down in Orange County, down in Costa Mesa, and we purchased a small rental community. It was 12 units, 12 little bungalows, West Side Costa Mesa. And we went through the condo conversion process with the city of Costa Mesa. And so what that means is we took these individual, so you purchase the piece of property as one entity, and then you're able to go through and separate each little individual unit and sell each one individually as a condominium. And so there were these cool little bungalows built in the late 50s. It had little bit of style to it. And we saw this opportunity to design and package this little community towards this customer or this audience that we thought was there was this customer that was like kind of being ignored
Yeah.
in real estate and home and kind of home ownership. And so we saw, you've had these like really sort of high end, well designed homes, and then you had these lower end homes that weren't very well designed. And so we wanted to come in somewhere a little bit in the middle, maybe a little bit closer to the bottom, but just these homes that were thoughtfully designed, had some some sort of design sensibility to it that would appeal to, we were thinking of as a first time home buyer. And so we did that, and we had a great success with it. And that was really my start into real estate, like full time. At the time I worked in the apparel industry, sportswear industry. I worked for Quicksilver for over 20 years. And while I was doing that first real estate deal, I was still like working at Quicksilver. After that deal, I I went to my boss and I was like, I quit. So and I started real estate full time.
So I know we talked about this, and I really want to dive back into condo conversions, just to give some people insight on how that process goes and really the granular aspect of, what we're looking at in terms of permitting to get that through the city and how long that takes.
Yeah. So when we did our condo conversion with this again with the city of Costa Mesa, oh my gosh! So the application that they had for us, it was one page.
That's nice.
So I would imagine that if you went through the condo conversion process today, it would probably be a stack of paperwork 2 inches thick. Yes.
Yes.
And so it was a little bit of a different time. This was, gosh, when was this? This was 2000, 2005, 2006, something like that, like
Okay.
kind of around there. And so we did two condo conversions. in the city of Costa Mesa. We did another one shortly thereafter. And so I really couldn't tell you how that process even works today. After we did the condo conversions down in Costa Mesa, I started flipping homes up, sort of 80% of them up in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so I started flipping homes right, kind of when the market was turning, when it hit the Great Recession, which
Okay.
was what, 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
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 And so so the market was just tanking. Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't think that there's really a market for condo conversions. Let's try flipping homes. And so again, I looked at what the competition was doing, and it looked like a lot of what I was seeing in terms of this like flipped home product was this sort of Home Depot sort of basic kind of thing. And again, I thought, gosh, I think there's a certain customer that's really not being addressed here. So let's try flipping a home and give it a little bit of style, give it sort of a point of view. Again, I came from the surf industry. I used a lot of that kind of background informed sort of the design of the place. and
Yeah.
so and so my first home, again, bottom of the market. Prices were actually still going down. Nobody knew where the bottom was. It was very like kind of scary.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, that home, it had such a crazy reaction, good reaction, that I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm onto something. And so
So
from there on,
thereon, you grew from there doing
yeah,
a lot of flips,
a
and
lot of flips. Yeah.
that's your main business today.
Hundreds and hundreds. Yeah.
So how did you I know a lot of people talk today about, okay, well, next month, next year is going to be the crash. It's going to, it's going to look really bad for real estate. How did you have the confidence, as it was going down, and felt comfortable buying something in that market? Um, was it the numbers, or you just felt good about that, or what were those things that really gave you the ability to purchase that property and actually flip it for a profit, especially when the market was going down?
Yeah. Someone once defined development to me as wild optimism.
All right, all right.
So again, it's the other thing that I tell people is all you had, like, in terms of, so a couple things. So one is good times, bad times. People are always going to be buying or selling real estate. Death,
Yeah.
divorce, taxes, that sort of thing. And so again, good market, bad market, you're going to see transactions. And so at the time, it was, I was like, well, I was looking, there was stuff for sale. It didn't, I thought I could do a better job. And so I've always said that if you price your product just a little bit lower
Hmm.
and you make your product just a little bit better than what the competition's doing, it should work out. And so, yeah, the first one, it was, there was like some kind of wild optimism that went along with that, and a little bit of it was rolling the dice. And a
Yeah.
lot of times when you're buying homes and you're flipping homes, it sometimes can feel a little bit like the Wild West. Um, and and it worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason I ask is, I wasn't in real estate at that time. And I know a lot of people say, well, I held off for a couple of years. At the end of the day, though, the people like yourself, the successful people within real estate, of what I've, learned and been educated on, are just like you said. What that developer said is basically, living off optimism and always buying in an up market, a down market, and a plateau, but making sure that the sound fundamentals are there, prior to purchasing, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've been riding a market now for a long time where it's just been going up, 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 up. And I remember gosh, a couple of years ago, you had this sort of ceiling of $1,000 a square foot. It was like, oh gosh, it'll never hit 1,000 a square foot. It'll never. And then it was like, it hit 1,000 a square foot.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, like, and so I've got this property that we're going to list in a couple of months. And we were looking at, again, looking at the comps out there and looking at the recent sales. And it's like, holy cow. I mean, stuff's pushing well over 1,200 a square foot. And so that's where we're at right now. And I also think that, all of what we're talking to speaks to the power of real estate. And so
Yeah.
you have people that are like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. It's so hard to get into this market. And yes, it is. And it always has kind of been that way. Anytime you purchase your first home or anytime you purchase your first investment, it's always a stretch. It's always scary. It's always, there's this big sort of what if.
Yeah.
And you look at the appreciation, especially Southern California real estate, over however many years you want to look at it. Pretty good investment.
Yeah. I mean, everybody I've talked to that especially bought, a long time ago or bought, 7, 8 years ago, let's mute out the crash, their appreciation on properties, is very significant, especially holding it. And there's things that I sold, one in particular that I sold back in 2016, I should have kept, and things like that ring true every time I talk to someone like you or somebody else. Is that appreciation, especially here in California, or on the East Coast, West Coast, is very significant. So for you, you're all based in not Orange County, but Southern California. You do all your stuff in LA, especially after those condo conversions that you did. What does your business look like now? And can you speak to, what volume you're kind of doing on a year-to-year basis and how you're running your crews?
Sure. So I have a handful of rental properties, long-term buy and hold, and then I also do the flips, and so the flips are more to kind of day-to-day sort of stuff, and then the long-term buy and hold is more, again, kind of riding it out, investment, retirement, that sort of thing. And I typically flip between 4 to 6 homes a year. And I do what's called, we nicknamed it the slow flip.
Okay.
And so usually when people think of a flipped home, they think of something that was done quickly and cheaply. And I think over the years and over time, some of the term flipped home has gotten kind of a bad rap. And so that was one of the things that I set out to address and hopefully correct, at least with my product. And so when we do our homes, when I flip these homes, again, I go through it thoughtfully. We try to do it right. We permit everything that we do, and we want to give our home buyer a quality product at fair, competitive price. And so I'm not in this $5 to $7 million range. I mean, right now we're sort of course, again, prices are going up, but we have a house that we're working on now that's going to go out in the mid, 1.4, 1.5 kind of thing.
Okay.
And as you and I were talking about earlier, I bought this little condo down in Orange County. That's going to go out somewhere in like the 3s or like maybe the 4s. So the product that I'm dealing with isn't this like ultra high end luxury kind of a thing. And a lot of the people that a lot of my home buyers are first time home buyers. And so again, try to do these flips that are thoughtful, that are well done. I've been in this business for a long time. I have this brand, BetterShelter, and I have a reputation to keep up.
Yeah.
And so I want happy customers.
Yeah. I mean, that a lot goes against the grain of, fix and flip, like you mentioned when you first started that paragraph, where, a lot of people are just in it for a quick, 25 to, let's say, $100,000 on a flip and on profit, and they don't really care what the product turns out to be. And I was kind of talking to another guest on my podcast about how ultimately, one person can really spoil the water for everybody else, where you have one flip that really turns bad or one real estate agent that isn't good. Well, it's great to hear, especially how you angle your business, where you want to make sure you're putting out a good product so the people aren't coming back 6 months later and saying, hey, everything fell apart,
Yeah.
cabinets and all. And you're putting out something that's going to hold true for years, especially when you're doing them in LA, which most likely those properties are a lot older on, raised foundations, and you have a lot more things underneath the hood, if you will,
Yes.
versus someone that's flipping a house that was built in 1990 or,
Right.
or 2000. So,
Yep.
so
That's a
for
that's a very good point. Yeah.
so for you, I mean, that's great to hear, and especially, I bet you a lot of people that do rehabs would like to hear that too. How can you stay within your margins? Because people will probably fight back and say, well, you gotta skim a little bit here to make sure that you can, net that profit that you want. But can you speak to how you're able to make sure your profits are still stable and intact while making sure the product turns out really great for that end consumer?
Yeah. I think a lot of it, a lot of what you just spoke to is with the contractors and the tradesmen that I work with. And so again, I've been in this business for a long time. And so I have my A team, and then below that, I have my B team that I'm training to be my A team. And then below that, I've got these guys that I'm just like talking to on the telephone.
Okay.
And it's interesting that with the kind of contracting world, and I guess really just with kind of life itself, it's like after I have some contractors that I've worked with for years, and then some guys, they move or they drift away or they do something different. And so the team sort of you cycle through people.
Hmm.
Um, and I've ended up with this core group of my HVAC guy, my flooring guy, my contractor, oh my gosh, my foundation guy, my roofer guy. I've been through so many nightmare. I mean, the stories I could tell you,
Yeah, I bet.
it's just like crazy. And so, price, quality, calendar, pick two.
Okay.
You can't have all three.
Yeah.
You just like it just doesn't work that way. And so mostly with my guys, it's price and it's quality.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm aiming for. And so I'm able to get my margins based off of working with these guys for so long, and I've got a great relationship with them. I pay my bills. I show up at the job site. I try to be clear with my communication. Like when we start off the job, of course I have a set of plans, they're stamped. I have a scope of work all written out, all itemized. I walk it through with the guys, and again, I try to be very clear about what my expectations are. So it's not, and listen, every time, no matter how detailed your scope of work is, you're always going to run into change
Yeah.
orders, and they're gonna open up a wall, and it's just gonna be like, oh my gosh, or they're gonna, something turns up. And that's part of it. Should not come as this big shocking surprise. And like you said
Yeah.
before, the houses that I work on, they were built in the 20s and the 30s. They're these old homes, and they have a lot of history to them, and like there's a lot of herky jerky stuff that goes on as well. And so so things can go south real quick. And so again, a little bit of that is part of the business. One of my rules of thumb is I try to keep my change orders below 10% of what the overall cost of the construction is. And
Okay.
so if it goes wildly over 10%, it means that, like, not like I did something wrong, but it's clearly I didn't do something right at the beginning of the job.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What's your parameters? I would, with you being in the business for this long and being able to have that, product that you're looking for, how'd you set those parameters for what you're looking for? And how long did that take? For instance, when you're looking for a house to flip, those parameters, like this is the house, this is the area, and how long did it take for you to say that light bulb switched and said, that's it, and that's the area?
Well, the majority of the houses that I work on are within a 10 or 15-minute drive of where I live.
Okay.
So
That's
there's
nice.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's not like I'm driving out to San Bernardino or to Riverside or anything like that. I try to keep it local. I'm a firm believer in how good your product turns out is a function of how often you show up at the job site.
Yeah.
And so I can't be there every day, but I can be there at least a couple of times a week. And I'm constantly checking in with my contractors and my guys. I'm like, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? And you show up at the job site, and the main contractor might not be there, and he'll have some of his workers doing something, and they're off doing something. I'm like, oh, time out. Let's
Yeah.
do it this way. And so it's able to, not only is it able to kind of rectify the situation, but it gets everyone back on track. You hopefully have saved a little bit of time, which is good for myself, and it's good for the contractor as well. So he doesn't have to do it over again. And so again, the parameters are, it's nice to be able to drive to
Yeah.
the houses. And so I'm looking for homes that are like, again, most of them built in the 20s and 30s. And so we do a lot of Spanish, we do Tudors, ones that have kind of character and charm to them. That
Yeah.
seems to be these buttons that push people's emotions. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Like the Spanish people go nuts for the Spanish homes. People go
Yeah.
nuts for the Tudor homes. And then down the list, you've got the craftsmans, and then you have the bungalows and the cottages. And so gosh, let's see, my dream home would be a Spanish on a flat lot with the huge
Yeah.
backyard with the 2-car garage for the ADU, a big
Yeah.
thing and big enough for a pool. It's like, if you can find that, it's just, again, it checks so many of these boxes that home buyers are looking for.
Yeah, and fortunately for you, with you said a 10-minute radius around where you live, in LA, that gobbles up a lot of properties and area. If we were in San Bernardino, which is an hour east of us, then if you're a 10-mile radius, you may not have that flavor and the variety that you do. Fortunately for you, being in a more impacted area, right? Which is great.
Yeah, I think anytime you're living in a sort of higher density urban city, you're going to have those layers of architecture and homes and character and age. And you have some neighborhoods that are newer, and you have some neighborhoods that are older. And so you're right. Here in Los Angeles, oh my gosh, you drive down some of these streets, and they're all old and decrepit, and I'll
Yeah.
be in the car with someone, and they'll be like, "Ooh, this is I don't like it here." And I'm like, and all I see is like, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Look at these homes!
Yeah. This is a gold mine.
Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
So, and it's just it's all sort of perspective.
Yeah.
And so I've done a lot of work in Northeast Los Angeles, which is like Silver Lake, Echo
Mm.
Park, Highland Park, a lot of parks, Cypress
Yeah.
Park, Gosh, 15, 17 years ago, some of those areas were kind of rough, and they were
Yeah.
a little sort of, oh my gosh, but now, oh my gosh, you look at it now, and a lot of that stuff has really turned a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you see that change in neighborhoods, and like yourself being an innovator, you're able to jump on those trends and and be ahead of the curve, which is fortunate for you instead of, showing up late to the party, if you will. So that's huge.
Yeah.
So when you were picking out your A squad for the contractors, how long did that take you? Did that take, a couple of years to finally figure out like, oh, okay, hey, these are the people that I'm going to use for until they move out of the area or they just quit the business completely?
I think finding a team that you work well with, it's just an ongoing process. And so one of the things that I do is that if if I'm working on a house in a particular area, as I'm driving up and down the streets, going back and forth between job sites or whatever, if I so let's just say I need a tile guy. I've seen tile guys working on other homes. I'll pull off to the side of the road, walk up to him, introduce myself. Oh, do you do tile? Yes, I do tile. ¿Quién es el jefe? Who's the boss? And
Yeah.
so I'll go to him and we'll talk a little bit, and then he'll give me his card. And so I've gotten like tons of leads that way.
Okay.
I've also, I go on to Nextdoor
Oh, yeah.
and I do a search for plumbers. I do a search for roofers. I do a search for HVAC guys, and I've actually had pretty good luck.
Yeah.
And then I've also, with this, with this condo that I purchased down in Laguna Hills, Orange County, I had a couple of contractors. We wanted to get some more bids and pricing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm out of guys. I just went on to Yelp. And so I called a couple people off of Yelp, and this one guy showed up, and he was like the greatest guy. He was like just like this cool, like this older gentleman. He'd seen it all, great disposition. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you meet
Yeah.
people and like you just know like this is a good guy. And
Yeah.
so I haven't done any work with him, but my point is that like to find that A team, you just gotta sometimes shake the tree.
Yeah.
And you can call people, ask I've got a network of flipper friends and people, and I'll text them. I need this guy, or do you have a recommendation for that? And then you have to enter that information into your phone. And so,
Yes.
and then whatever your systems and structures are. So then 2 years later, 3 years later, you're in a pinch and you're like, oh my gosh, like my I'll give you an example. So I was working on this house up in Los Feliz. This just happened.
Yeah.
So I was scheduled to meet with my landscape guy, and it's this landscape. He's like the best guy. He's my A team guy. I've been working with him for years. And so of course, landscaping is one of the very last things. So we're at the very end of this job, and it's like every day kind of counts. And you, at the very end, again, everything becomes kind of critical. You don't want people sort of stomping on stuff, and it all has to be timed out thoughtfully.
Yeah.
So the day before I'm supposed to meet with my landscaper, his son calls me. Oh, Jesus just had a heart attack. I was like, oh my gosh, he's in the
Yeah.
hospital. Thank God he was okay.
Yeah.
But my point is I was like, oh my gosh, I've been working with this guy for so long. And so I went into my phone and I had all the landscaper guys that I'd kind of interviewed over the years. And it was like, I had 6 landscapers out at that job site within a couple of days. And so most of them were like, oh my gosh, I'm too busy. I can't do it. And I found a guy and we
Yeah.
got it done, and the job's done. And he did a great job. And so I found this guy. And so again, I have Jesus, who's still my A team guy, but my new guy, Jorge, he's my B team, and he
Yeah.
did pretty good. And we worked well together, and his pricing was pretty good. And so
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Are you buying, this brings up another question. Are you buying these properties? Are you doing owner builder, or do you have a general contractor you work with?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So some of the jobs we do owner builder, and then
Okay.
some of the jobs we do with a contractor. And so
Gotcha.
with the city of Los Angeles, you can do owner builder. Again, going back to the little condo that I purchased in Laguna Woods, the HOA is asking for. They're like, we want a licensed contractor. Okay, no problem. And so we have to work with a licensed contractor. But a
Gotcha.
lot of times we just go owner builder. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's kind of what I was picking up, and I didn't ask you on that last one. So, talk a little bit about that. How is that different comparatively to using an actual general contractor, and what are the differences? Just if someone doesn't know that's listening.
Well, I mean, a general contractor is someone who has their contractor's license, who, hopefully has the insurance and everything that goes along with it. And then when you do it owner builder, you act as the general contractor, and you're responsible for everything. And so again, most of the time, that's what I do. I'll work with sort of a contractor type of guy on
Hmm.
most of my jobs, but I'll sub out the tile, I'll sub out the roofing. I have an HVAC guy, I have an electrician, I have a plumber, I've got a great flooring guy that I like. Like I mentioned, I have a great landscaper that I like. And so sometimes when the contractor says that he can do everything, sometimes they can,
Yeah.
and sometimes they can't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's very true. And then you're also, I mean, going back to the margins and stuff like that, like if you know what you're doing and you're able to put those pieces into the puzzle properly at the right times of that flip, then that's what the contractor's doing, and that's what they're there for. But if you're owning the property in your own name, you can do it, builder owner, and then from there you're saving that money once again if you're able to know which of those pieces of the puzzle fit into what place.
yeah, I think in terms of like looking at your sort of the exit strategy in doing these flips, again, so much of it is price per square foot, and where a flipper person can realize some value and increase in the property is through adding on.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like to look for properties that have a little bit of a larger lot.
Okay.
A lot of what you're allowed to build is predicated on the size of the lot. And I won't build it to the nth degree, to the very edge of whatever is allowed.
Hmm.
Typically for Los Angeles, whatever the lot size is, you can build up to 45% of the lot size.
Okay.
Yep. And so if it's a 10,000 square foot lot, you can build a home that's 4,500 square feet.
Okay.
And so I'm not the big modern box McMansion guy. That's not what I do.
Hmm.
I'm more the kind of, again, the boutique, thoughtful guy that tries to sort of maintain the integrity and charm of these old homes. Um, and so again, when you're looking, it's like, oh my gosh, well, you're paying so much money for the house at the beginning, and then building costs are this. It's like, how am I going to make money? Well,
Yeah.
again, a lot of it is through building some sort of an addition. Of course, now we have all the ADU stuff that's happening right now,
Yeah.
which the cities have now finally, in case you haven't heard, Southern California is in a housing shortage, and
Yeah.
every city has been mandated to provide more units and more housing. And if they don't, the state is going to withhold a lot of these funds from these cities. And so it's a big deal. It's a serious thing. And so everyone's looking at it, trying to crack this code. And so again, for people like myself, being able to do the ADU in the back it's a great way to go, and it's a great way to add value.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's especially right now, outside of looking, at a big lot and adding square footage to the house. If you can't do that, like you spoke to a minute ago, the ADU thing is, a lot of people are into it. A lot of people are doing it. LA County and all in LA are really the people that are doing it the most. And then as you spread out, you get it a little bit less and less. But there's more and more people I see on Bigger Pockets talking about ADUs. The one thing is that you run into, if you don't have an ADU that's sold, with a house, LA County is a little bit different, but if you're in an area that there's not a lot of sales with an ADU, the evaluation after you build it is tough to come by. We're doing one in Redlands, which is an hour east, and that one is on a big lot, and we're just basically, there's 2 garages on it, so we're adding an extra 400 square feet to a garage to make it 800 square feet and a 2-bed 1-bath. But there's been some ADUs that are in that area that have sold for good prices, so we can utilize those as our comps when we go refi.
Yeah, and I think that with any sort of new technology or new product, when the appraiser guy comes out to appraise the property or whatever, or the bank, you're talking to the bank, sometimes there's a little bit of you got to educate people a little bit. And
Yeah,
so whenever we have a house that we're selling, and we accept the offer, and then they bring out their appraiser, we 99.9% of the time we meet the appraiser, we
yeah,
walk them through the house, and even though some things might not be, we just make sure we let them know about everything. And so even though like it might not be livable legal square footage, we again want to educate the appraiser to whatever it is that we're up to, and oftentimes they'll get it and they'll assign some sort of value to it.
yeah.
So a lot of it is just an education.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because those appraisers, I've spoke to this before, but some of those appraisers could be coming from, you're in LA, they could be coming from the Inland Empire, they could be coming from Orange County, and they don't really
Yep.
know the area and ultimately
Yep.
don't know what you did with the property. So
Yep.
it's always good to, give them some type of information on the comparables and everything else. So with you're doing a flip down in Orange County. You've done flips for a long time. What are some things that you've learned in the past, 5 to 10 years on doing flips that ultimately has put you, leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of different people that are maybe taking your same business model that maybe you can share with us?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, one thing that I spoke about earlier is really generating a thorough scope of work. And so again, you want to make sure that everything exists in a written document. So I'll develop the scope of work and I'll walk it with my contractor, and then we'll go through the scope of work again, and I'll have a general scope of work, I'll have an electrical scope of work, and then I'll have a plumbing scope of work. And sometimes the contractor will do the electrical and the plumbing. Some, again, like I said before, sometimes I'll farm that stuff out separately. And so I'll walk the house with the contractor from the front of the house to the back of the house and go through the scope and ask him, what is there anything missing? Is there anything that I haven't put on here? What do you see? And so oftentimes I'll amend the scope of work. And so you want to start off with this document that's very clear and concise.
Yeah.
And after you've done this, I've done it quite a few times. The other thing that I was going to say is that you want systems and structures that are repeatable. And
Yeah.
so I've developed a scope of work over doing this hundreds of times, that it's not boilerplate, but like doing a bathroom is doing a bathroom.
Bathroom.
They're
Yeah.
pretty much, whether it's a $4 million home or a $300,000 condo, a toilet's a toilet.
Yeah.
And so you can take your scope of work, and of course each project's going to vary slightly, but you do have this document that, again, systems and structures that are repeatable. And so over the course of doing this, you want to make sure that you stay current, and you want to make sure that you're keeping up with the times in terms of like the product that you use, the wood flooring, maybe some of the design choices.
Yeah.
Um, so you want to grow and evolve. And if you're trying to reinvent the wheel every single time, you're just going to go cuckoo.
Yes.
And so I try to be very thorough again and thoughtful about how I organize myself, and I can kind of pull from. It was like, oh, what was the faucet that we used at that job site, 4 years ago, or whatever it is. I'm able like that to pull it out and go, oh, okay, and it was this much money. And so that sort of information, to be able to have all that stuff at your fingertips, is very helpful. So there's that. And I
Yeah.
also spoke about, like having a great team to work with,
Hmm.
and sort of how to kind of get your team, and how keeping your team and growing your team. It's never like, oh, I've got my team, I'm done. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. Again, it's always sort of evolving. And
Yeah.
again, you've got Nextdoor, you've got Yelp, you've got driving up and down the streets, and having all of that stuff prepped into your phone, or however you organize your life, to be able to bring all that stuff, to bring up all landscapers at a moment's notice. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. It's just, do you realize how much brain damage and time I just
Uh,
saved by not having to start from step one?
yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, I would say, fundamentals and a solid foundation for sure. That's the biggest thing. And like you said, you have a lot of these, A squad, A players that are ones that you use all the time, and something may happen. It's a living organism. You always got to make sure everything's moving and breathing properly, because just like, everybody else, they have emergencies in their life, and then at the same time they may be going through something and ultimately start not showing up to job sites when you need them there and you want them there. So you got to pick up the pieces and make sure that there's another person, a pinch hitter that can come in and take their place, and then that's good and you're satisfied with their work.
Very much so. Yeah. And I think, you gotta, of course, this almost goes without saying, you have to treat people nice.
Yeah.
And you want to treat people, you just want to be, kind of kind with people, and not come onto a job site and kind of freak out. And sometimes I look around and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think, like, sometimes I'll just like immediately want to go to the contractor and go, oh, you didn't do what I told you to do, or whatever that is. In other words, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then I'll call him up. And again, I've worked with these guys for so long, and he's like, oh no, Mr. Steve, we talked about this, or and then I'm like, oh, you're right. And some of these guys, I'm like, how do they remember this stuff? And it was
Yeah.
like, it kind of goes out my, I forgot. And he reminds
Yeah.
me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you were right. Okay. Yes. Yes. And so it helps to have a good temperament. And
Mm.
like I said before, it's like, part of the nature of this business is that stuff it can go sideways, kind of quickly. And
Yeah.
so you gotta have a little bit kind of the stomach and the temperament for it. And it's not like I'm trying to scare people off. It's actually like, it can be really like exciting. And there's something incredible about going onto a job site and seeing the progress build as time goes on, and seeing like your hard work come to fruition. There's
Yeah.
nothing like it.
Yeah. What would you say in the last, let's just put it 2 to 3 years, one project that sticks out in your mind that you were excited about, and why was that?
Well, gosh, my problem is that I fall in love with all my homes.
Yeah.
It's just like, you spend and the cool thing, like we were talking a little bit about, big cities and kind of, urban density and all that sort of stuff. It's like, I go into some of these neighborhoods these little kind of pockets, and you don't know that much about the neighborhoods, and you go to the cafes and you go to the
Yeah.
stores and you start to meet people, and then you meet the neighbors and you're walking up and down the streets. And I'm like walking around these streets and I'm like, holy cow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I did a house down in View Park. I think that was that last year? Anyway, it was, it was year 2 years ago,
Yeah.
which is this it's called View Park. It's a little bit south, kind of off of Crenshaw, and it's predominantly African American, and the same developers that developed Hancock Park, which is this kind of Tony, nice neighborhood in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
$6-7 million homes. Well, the same developers, this is in the 1920s, they developed View Park.
Oh.
And so it's crazy. And so it's like this miniature version of Hancock Park. It's
Oh, really?
incredible. And so I'm driving around here and I'm like, oh my gosh, again, this is amazing. And
Yeah.
so it's just, it's neat to get like kind of invested in these communities. And it's neat to see the impact that you have on neighborhoods and
Yeah.
neighboring homes, and sort of adding to the flavor and the charm of these neighborhoods. It's super cool. And so, like I said, I mean, I get excited about everything.
Yeah.
And that's that's
Yeah.
kind of, I go with my real estate agent. We go to look at houses, and she's like, "Oh, this one." I'm like, "No, look at this one's like."
This is the one I want.
Yeah, it's so we're constantly, sort of, and she and, and it's good. It's good. She kind of tempers me a little bit, and
Yeah.
so she's like, "Oh, well, there's a couple things I won't do. One is shared driveways."
Okay.
And so if
Yeah.
we pull up to a prospective flip and I see a shared driveway, I'm like, "Oh,
You're out.
I don't think so."
Yeah.
And it's
then
funny.
garage.
It's like, yeah, and it has to have a garage. It cannot
Yeah, I
have a
remember that.
carport. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll transition a little bit. For you, you have all these systems in place and everything going through your business. What have you used lately that has an online tool, app, or resource that's helped you guys be more efficient?
Well, so I partner with a lot of people on homes.
Yeah.
I've done tons of partnerships, and it's so cool because you get to learn how other people's processes are. And so I partnered with this friend of mine who flips homes, and so they're totally into Builder Trend.
Mm.
And so it's a software program. And so
Okay.
he's like, everything lives on Builder Trend. And
Okay.
so it's a great way to communicate with all the subs and the trades. And so that's one thing that we've been using. It's been Builder Trend. But I got to tell you, for me, it's just my phone. I'm able to, like I said, if you're able to enter your contacts correctly, and kind of again, anytime I find someone from next door,
Yeah.
in the contact itself, I'll put in the notes next door.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll be like, God, and again, this goes back, years and years. I remember, right now we need a window washer. And so I'm going through this whole thing. Normally we just do it ourselves, but I have this like huge house. I'm like, oh my God, I need a window washer. And so we're like, wait, did I talk window washer? Who was that? And so now when I plug it into my contact, if I got my contact person from next door, I'll write in there next door. And now what I do is that I put the date as well. I'll do 0721. So it's like, I can call that guy 4 years from now and say, hey, we spoke, and we spoke 4 years ago.
All right.
And so it just kind of makes it be a little bit more sort of personable. And it also, for me, I'm just juggling with so much stuff.
Yeah.
To be able to to parse this information and compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
And again, to have all of this sort of stuff at your fingertips. I had mentioned before that every time we purchase something, we enter it into the system through invoicing. And so I can bring up at a moment's notice whatever job site it was, if it was the bathroom faucet from 6 years ago, it'll take me 4 seconds to bring it up.
Yeah,
And that's powerful.
that
And
is.
that's just on my phone. And so just that thing that you carry around with you is just, it's such a powerful, powerful tool.
Yeah, I keep all my stuff on Dropbox, so I'm usually able to, same thing. It's so nice.
Dropbox. I use Dropbox too. Every single home that I have a file for my, I have a Dropbox file.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then you can just totally friggin' geek out with all the little folders and folders within folders, and it's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's very handy, and you can get things, information that, like you said, on a property you did 3 or 4 years ago to find that faucet, and you have the invoice right there, so you can say, hey, this is what we ordered and it's still available. Let's buy it.
Yep.
So that, yeah. What about a book that's helped you over the years, focus on real estate or help you out with real estate?
Yeah. Well, it was so years and years and years ago, I read The Millionaire Next Door.
Oh yeah.
And so
Go,
it
go.
had this big impact on me. And so it's basically live within your means, set something up. And so that was the thing that kind of got me onto buying rental property.
Mm,
And so prior to reading that book, I had never considered like being a landlord as sort of this thing. I
yeah.
always thought like having a job was like was like I was just like, I had a job and it paid, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I just am so grateful for all the real estate that I've held on to. And like you said earlier, there's some stuff that I've sold and I'm like, oh my gosh, I look at all of the homes that I've flipped. And that's
Oh
the
yeah.
thing with flippers. I mean, they like, you kind of turn and burn through these homes. It's like, oh my gosh, what if I had held on to every 10th home or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, exactly. And I hear that from a lot of different wholesalers, flippers, same thing. It's
Yes.
like, why didn't I hold on to, buy four, sell three and keep one, and then
Yeah.
continue to do that?
Yeah,
So
and I think that for anyone out there that's listening that really wants to, invest their future into real estate, it's like you want to be on you want to have some sort of a goal where it's going to be like, I'm going to buy one rental property every 3 years or every
yeah,
2 years or whatever it is, and then
yeah,
just work on that goal.
yeah,
Because it's like, and again, it's the power of real estate. You buy that first piece of property, you hang on to it for a little while, it gets the appreciation, you refinance, pull some money out, step, repeat, do it
yep.
again.
Do it
And
again.
so, and that's the way to, it's like an incredible way to accumulate wealth. It's an incredible way for financial freedom.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's how, a lot of the people that you and I, as we go up, looked up to, and that's what they did, was just, make sure their money was working for them. And it takes a while. It takes, it's slow and steady, but I think that's at times why people get discouraged, is, that they think it's going to be too slow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It is, it is sometimes slow, but when you look at the way that real estate and mortgages and just the whole thing is kind of set up, it's like to be able to control, let's say you bought your house, let's say you paid $800,000 for your house, to be able to control an $800,000 asset with however much money you put down,
Hmm.
couple, to be able to control an $800,000 asset. It's not like you had to buy it for $800,000.
Yeah.
You can actually finance it for a whole heck of a lot less.
Yep.
And you still have the appreciation of an $800,000 asset. And so, like you said, over time, that becomes very, very, very powerful.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even, talking about the deal I sold in 2016, even after, 4 to 5 years, you look back and you're like, well, I could have easily made, an extra $100,000 or whatever that, wherever you are, whatever market you're in, I could have made X amount more. So hindsight's always 2020, especially
Yeah.
when it comes into, real estate. Well, Steve, before we get you out of here, where can people find out more about you? Where can, they check you out online and get in contact with you?
So Steve Jones, and my company is BetterShelter.
Okay.
So bettershelter.com, on Instagram at BetterShelter, Twitter at BetterShelter.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. Thanks for coming back on and making this a successful podcast. And I really appreciate your insight on what you do in your business, because it's definitely going to help out myself, here and for the long run, and also the listeners.
It's been a pleasure, and anytime you can have me back. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thanks, Steve.